But well, welcome everybody back to another fantastic Compost Academy webinar. I'm Raleigh Latham, joined here today by Keishan Casey Ernst and Brian Vaugh. Today's a very exciting session because guess what? This is case studies. And, even though a lot of us love diving deep into the science, case studies are all about sharing the work of how this pays off practically on the ground. And today, we're sharing 8 years worth of work in biological soil restoration using compost, using extract, using compost teas. This is the incredible work that Keisha, Casey, and Brian have done with clients. And I think it's going to wow you guys just seeing what they have pulled off by working with biology. Now, why don't we hop into this? Let me know when the screen share pops on. Could everybody see the
Good
little
to go.
logo with
Yeah, you're
everybody?
good.
Awesome. You guys look good. Well, today, of course, we're starting off. This is a big webinar showcase. This is all about case studies. Now, if you want to learn more about dive deep into the theory and really the science behind soil biology and composting, we have many webinars for that. We have intro courses about that. But today's all about showing you how this work pays off. So we're going to hop in today. I'm going to introduce our team and how they got into soil biology, where they're going. So my name's Raleigh Latham. I help run Compost Academy. It's a really awesome school we put together to show people how to practically restore soils with composting and how to make compost that can actually have an impact on landscapes. And so I've been kind of behind the camera in a lot of this, but also been able to get my hands dirty making my own compost. It's been great. Joined by Brian Vaugh. He is a composter. He is a soil consultant extraordinaire. He works with clients all across California and the West Coast, and so many exciting stories that he has that he's working on. And of course, Keishan Casey Ernst of Catalyst Bioamendments and Soil Matters. They are some of the stars here today where we're showing the work that they've done across California, across the states. You're going to see some really epic things that they worked on in Malibu. And of course, they have an amazing compost company called Catalyst Bioamendments that you can buy biologically compost from. But to start off with my own little snippet here, this is the one slide I get. It's been really fun working with Compost Cat in this last year because making compost is something that sometimes you don't get to see the results. You might start off, but for me, it's been awesome pairing with a microscope and getting to see the results of the compost we've made. Like, because we did this last year in Costa Rica and it was really fun. We knew it was high quality, but I didn't get the chance a few months to see it under the microscope. So when I got back and we started doing our program, I got to make the compost on my own and then got to see it break down month after month until it became this really beautiful soil. And then I compared it. I looked at it and it's like, oh my gosh, compared to Miracle Grow or commercial compost, this is like an old growth forest. There's every field view is full of fungi and so many nematodes. There's protozoa, and so it really just showed me that this works. This actually works. And then I got to apply it on my, kale plants in my neighbor's garden, and actually got to see, wow, these are thriving. So the really important thing we want to show today is the proof is when you start to apply it on land. And that's what we want to show you. Like these are results of when you start to apply biology that you know is good on the land. And oftentimes these projects takes years, but they have tremendous successes when they get started. And it's worth the wait because an enormous payoff can come. So we're going to start off today with Brian Vag sharing about his work he's done with Alex Whitesides in Placerville. So Brian, why don't you carry it away? I'm going to pin you and we'll get started.
That's good. Thanks, Raleigh. So, yeah, as Raleigh mentioned, we're going to be talking about Gala Vineyards, and really they have two properties. They have one property in Placerville, which is in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas in California, which is a wine region that we would designate inside of California. And then they also have another vineyard in Napa. And it's really interesting. I had a lot of fun working in this project because the two properties are very different from each other. The Placerville, which is the one we're going to look at here first, it was an old hayfield, so we planted it from scratch. And when we get to the Napa property, it was an existing vineyard that my client had purchased, and we are going through the process of transitioning it to be more soil health, soil focused, regenerative practices, and so forth. So let's focus though on the Placerville for right now. And what I really love about this project is this land was really beaten up. In fact, my client Alex Whitesides, he has this really great Google photo where there was a picture the year before we actually started work on the property, and it's in the springtime in California, which usually it's a lot of green grass growing everywhere. And you see this huge satellite photo, and it's all green except for this plot of land, and that's where the vineyard is going to go, right? And it was just really, really beaten up, so bad that even the grasses, the weedy species, were struggling to grow very well there. And so when we started, we did some testing and we looked at the soil, and the soil was really, really compacted. I mean, I was using a tool called a penetrometer, which measures the pressure needed to be able to push through the soil profile. And I could barely, with all my weight, even get it in an inch or two in the ground. It was so compacted. And then when we did a microbiology assessment, it was just highly degraded. There was no good structure to it. There was no aggregation. It was just bacterial growth. I couldn't find any fungi or protozoa or nematodes and so forth. So we knew we had a really significant challenge. And when we started this project, we said, all right, we've got to address the compaction issues. And so we subsoiled it to down to 3 feet. We added compost, and we reconditioned the field, and then we planted our grapevines. And when we planted the grapevines, it we soaked them in compost extract, planted them with high quality compost that actually came from Catalyst Biomints from Kishi and Casey, and the vines just took off. In fact, from day one now, we have just had tremendous good growth, great plant vigor, and the vineyard is doing really, really well. And what I really like about this kind of before and after, you can see we went from that really hugely degraded land to now actually a thriving vineyard. And the harvest this year was just fantastic. You could see there was so much grapes on the vines. It was really, really neat. And one last thing I will mention is that my client, we really want to incorporate animals into the equation. And so we brought sheep and we brought chickens. And they are really, our animal helpers are doing just wonderful work for us. We brought in owl boxes so that we can control the rodent populations, and the owls have all populated in the owl boxes. Bees have been added. So there's a very living ecosystem in here. In fact, when you go to the vineyard, we were just there a few weeks ago. There was bunny rabbits. There was, I think, deer on the other side of the fence that we saw. Turkeys. It was turkeys that we also saw too that were going through. Yeah, so it was quite a neat. Next slide, Raleigh. Okay, so 7 years in the making for us to kind of go through this process, and one of the stellar things that's really come out about this is in the Placerville region, there's been some struggle, in the whole wine market in general, especially in the United States. There's been kind of this recession, and it's been hard for a lot of grape growers to be able to sell all their product. In fact, it's been really, really tough. But my client, because of the approach they went, they're natural winemaking. They've only used the biological components. We haven't added any agrochemical products at all. So it's been compost teas, and compost extracts. And the people who are buying the grapes from my client are just absolutely thrilled with the taste. It tastes so different. It gets that terroir, the taste of the land. And so we're going to watch a little video that's going to talk a little bit about that. But one thing I would just kind of end with this, talking about this property, is that because of the care that they've taken, they've been able to lock in long-term contracts where everybody else in the region has not. They're selling out all of their grapes when nobody else is selling theirs out. And it just goes to show you that the quality of the product they're producing is at a scale that is much above everything else in the region. So we're super thrilled. So Riley, you want to show that video of the Placerville?
Oh yeah, queuing up the video here. Give me one moment here. Oh, come on. Just in the right file. There we go. All right, great.
And last time I was here, there was a fence
Right.
around. There was star thistle
Everywhere.
covering everywhere.
Yeah.
And there were tiny
Little grape plants.
little grape plants.
Yeah. Little grape vines. What was going on here? Yeah, it's what a 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing when you go walk through the vineyard now. You know, one of the things I was talking with Alex about, we discussed this about ecosystems, but he said, I get it now. I see the ecosystem. I see the bugs, the insects, the birds, everything's coming into the vineyards, and it's just, oh, it just warms my heart.
Yeah.
To see it. What Alex is finding, and the winemakers who buy his grapes, is that the flavor is different. This vineyard, the grapes have the terroir, that the flavor of the land, and that's what the winemakers are looking for. And so, even though the plants may look, they're not as that green and vibrant, they're being fed simply because the microbes are doing the nutrient cycling in the soil. Mm-hmm. One of the approaches that Alex took when we did this vineyard, he wanted to make sure that we didn't apply any agrochemical products if necessary. And to this date, we have not had to apply anything but compost extracts, and compost teas. And you can tell that this is thriving. This is a thriving ecosystem. I mean, I'm already sitting here and I'm hearing all the bees buzzing around, all the birds chirping. You can go over to his neighbor's vineyard, go out in the middle of the vineyard, and you probably couldn't hear anything but wind.
Nice.
It was
Everybody hear that all right?
Yeah, it came across great,
Awesome.
Raleigh. Yeah, it was such a great day when we went out there to go kind of tour the property and do some filming, just to see it, so many years down the road and just how things are really falling into place for us, right? You can see as we talk about ecosystems, how's the ecosystem starting to really establish, and it's becoming evident year after year after year, that kind of deeper ecosystem kind of stability that's been created in that farm. And we've spent a lot of time working on hedgerows and getting all the insectaries and putting up all of the animal systems so that the animals can really thrive in that space. And boy, it's been really nothing but a big win for us there. Now let's talk about the Napa property. So this one is grapes that have been planted there. I think they're 30 years old at this point, at least some of the older grapevines. And when they bought this property, it was conventional, and it had already just kind of started the process of going maybe towards organic. But our client had really said, hey, we're going to apply that focus we did at Placerville to here at Napa, which is to really wean ourselves off of the chemical inputs and really try to establish good soil health and regenerative practices and just rely upon the biological products. And they are in that process. And I tell you what, the vineyard is just thriving. When we got there, there was a lot of problems with drainage, so there wasn't good soil structure. And we had viruses like red blotch and other diseases that were hitting the vineyard. The drainage issues have resolved. We've got much better soil structure now, and the red blotch has gone away, and some of the other pest and disease pressures have definitely reduced over time. So it's a lot of fun to be able to see this more conventional vineyard and how we can transition it. So it was really kind of cool to have a client that had these two different paradigms to work with, which is a brand new start from scratch to transition the existing, property. And we were able to use basically the same tools to do that. Some different methodologies and some different things we had to pay attention to. But in reality, we still use compost teas, and compost extracts, with high quality inoculum to be able to make those changes. So let's listen to Alex and I have a conversation here at the Napa Vineyard.
Let me just cue this up. Here we go.
It's been almost 7 years now. And, it's been impressive for me to see it from when we first came here. The vines definitely seem like they have more vigor. I mean, granted, these are more established, vines that are here. Yeah. But the property is looking really good.
Yeah, overall the nature of it and the ecosystem seems to balance out a lot better and just brought a lot more life to it overall. Between the boxes and the Naka sprays and just the natural way of doing it has really brought it back to life.
Yeah, so, and what do you say as far as, because you guys were kind of managing conventional and you started to apply, the more the microbial approach and more focus on soil health and that type of thing, how would you characterize the reduction in some of the inputs that you were using, or the vineyard was using when you first bought the vineyard?
Yeah, I know that when we first took it over, the recipes and the things that they were given were all conventional and heavy fertilizer use and different that. They had started to transition from using chemical fertilizers and everything before we took it over, and then the fire happened and we kind of just made it go all the way that way.
Obviously, the winemakers, the people that are going to be buying your grapes,
Yeah.
They're going to have feedback for you. So what kind of feedback have you got?
I know that they've described it as electric in the fruit, on the whites.
Electric?
Yeah, it was the actual words that he was using. That was cool.
So that was another fun day that we had out at the Napa property. And they were doing harvest that day, which is always kind of a fun thing because there's so much stuff that's going on. And we got to do a little bit of a barrel tasting with them and so forth. But, overall, I mean, it really warms my heart to be able to see a client, that really came into this with not a lot of experience. When you talk to Alex, when he started this, he came from the construction world, and it was more of a passion project with his family. So his sister, she's a winemaker, and the parents kind of help, with the whole overall, managing the properties and so forth. As they took what little experience they had and really jumped in with all feet to be able to try to do this work. It was kind of overwhelming, but it's really good to hear them now. Like, things are settling in, that things are locking into place, and they feel very confident about the future in their vineyards, where I think a lot of other farmers right now don't have that confidence because they don't have good controls over their input costs. The market's not very favorable to them. So if you're able to create a high quality product and you can control your input costs much more, locally, then you're in a much better position. So it's really good to kind of feel them that, like, yeah, the future looks really good for us. And I think that's just great.
And we can
Okay.
all attest those grapes were so good. Like, you had a handful and it felt like you downed an entire bottle of grape juice. It was, yeah, I've
Yeah.
never had grapes like that.
I got such a sugar rush that day we were in Placerville because we were just, they said, hey, we're done at the harvest. Whatever's left, you guys can just eat what you want. And boy, I ate, I think, I don't know, 5, 6 clusters of grapes. It was crazy.
We should have
Remember
taken a
how sticky these
refractometer,
grapes
would
were?
have broke.
Yeah. What was that, Keisha?
Remember how sticky they were? We just
Oh,
holding
yeah.
our hands, the juice was like run. It was horribly sticky and delicious.
Delicious, exactly. All right, so one other case study that I wanted to mention from my part of the presentation was another one of our clients, Irvine Company. So a little bit about Irvine Company. They are the largest landholder in Southern California, and that's really around their commercial and retail properties. And this is a kind of a picture of Irvine. In fact, most of the properties that you're seeing right now are actually owned by Irvine Company. So they have a tremendous amount of properties that they manage, and landscape horticulture is the name of the game. And for them, it's much different from agriculture, which is about production and quality of the cash crop that you're producing. In a horticulture aspect, especially in a situation like this, it's all about aesthetics. Can we get the right aesthetics to be able to match what they're trying to show with those properties that they have? And this is in Southern California. And in fact, one of the challenges that we have in Southern California is water. Right now we're not under necessarily a hardcore drought, but the periods of drought are becoming longer and more severe, and water restrictions coming from the county or the city have been part of the paradigm, and will in the future for sure impact everybody living in Southern California. So my client Tony at the Irvine Company said, hey, look, we wanted to do a study that says, can we, by applying good soil health and soil biology, can we impact water usage? I.e., can we reduce the amount of water that we're using our properties and still maintain really stellar aesthetics? So that was the purpose of the study. In fact, it was a 2-year-long study that we did in one of their retail centers. Next slide, please. And so, this was the Alton Retail Center. So it's just a little, retail center that we wanted to do some test to control and determine, if we really did a good focus on soil biology and soil health, could we reduce the amount of water that we were using effectively, and in this case, kind of get ahead of any potential regulation coming down the pipeline that was going to reduce the amount of water that would be allocated. So this was a 2-year-long study, and we had to keep the existing landscape. So what we did is we broke the property up into test plots and control plots. So we had a turf control plot, a turf test plot. Same with palms, same with pines, and same with camphors. And really what we're going to do through this entire process was to treat. So, and when we say treat, we're going to be using compost extracts. That was the tool of the day. And when we were using those compost extracts, we were going to be placing those in the test plots, and in the control plots, we were not going to be putting any of the compost extract. And then what we wanted to do was we were going to do good soil testing. In fact, this study we did not only microbiology assessments, we did soil chemistry, we did plant tissue analysis, we did DNA analysis of the microbes in the soil, we did aggregate stability, carbon. It's a huge suite of data because really, a large company like Irvine, they wanted to make sure if they're going to make a huge change to their environment, that they want to make sure that they were able to prove this out, that it seemed like all the data supports the conclusions that we were coming to. So we reduced water incrementally. And in fact, Raleigh, if you can go to the next slide, please. So we had, really started in June of 2022. So we did kind of our pre-sampling and took our baseline measurements, you could say. And then in July of 2022, we did our first compost application. And then by November 2022, we were looking at really good results coming from our test plots where we were able to see the microbial community starting to establish. And we reduced the irrigation by 15%. So that's a significant amount of water, 15% at that point. And then we went to June 2023, we did our second compost extract application. And then by August of 2023, we were thinking, all right, things are looking really, really well. So let's make another major jump. We went to 30% irrigation reduction. And then by the time we went from August to October, this is the dry part of the season when we did that reduction, it was just pushed a little too far. We started to see some reduction in the microbial communities. We started seeing maybe a little bit of plant, going, hey, we're not quite getting enough moisture. So we returned the irrigation back to that 15% marker that we had. We re-looked at our recipes and said, you know what, well, let's make sure that we're using really high quality compost extract. And then by the time we got to June 2024, we went to a 20% reduction in irrigation. And boy, we saw that it just held really, really well. And in fact, by July 2024, we looked at our final sampling. We've looked at that property and said, you know what, the microbial community is really getting well established. We're seeing great aggregation in the soil. And now we're looking to push again back into that 25-30% reduction in water. And it's hard to tell, but when we really looked at it, we're talking about saving hundreds of thousands of gallons of water for this small little retail spot as far as the amount of water that we apply by just having a 20% reduction. And overall, my client was thrilled. It was like, okay, we have been able to show that if we do focus on soil health and soil biology, we try to get really good stable aggregates into the soil. Now we have a good key to success as far as getting ahead of any potential regulation. So if the city was to say, hey, look, we're going to reduce your allotments by 20%, right now our client feels like that'd be fine. We can actually handle that. We have a tool in front of us to be able to address that particular kind of condition. Next slide, please. So a couple things when we looked at this too, we wanted to look at the plant vigor and aesthetics, because again, it was just not only, reduce water, but it was also reduce water with maintaining good plant vigor and aesthetics. So we didn't observe any mortality at all across the entire property as far as, in the test plots where we did the water reduction. And we didn't lose any of the trees, ground cover, the shrubs, everything really thrived. And in fact, with some of the plants, the palms and the plants that kind of surrounded the palms, there's some vines that they put in there. I can't remember the name of the vine, but we definitely saw really improved vigor in a number of those species of plants. So not only did we see, hey, we reduced water, but the vigor was looking better. The aesthetics were looking great. And so, we have really high hopes that Irvine Company is really starting to pay attention to this now. And we are on another project where we're looking at olive trees, where there's a lot of disease issues with olive trees, and we're looking to see how can we use good, again, regenerative practices, soil health, soil biology, to be able to regenerate those trees, and then also change the practices around those trees for the long haul, how we plant them and so forth. So it's just really good to see a client that's in a different space that says, hey, look, we think that there's a huge need to be able to focus on soil biology and soil health, and then making the changes. And overall, I mean, it's a much better paradigm for us as well. We're removing chemicals from the equation. These are spaces where humans exist around. So with anything we can do to make it healthier for us as humans to be able to live into as well as another huge win in our standpoint. Okay, that's what I had to go talk about.
Great job, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Woo. Now we're moving on to Casey's going to share about Alamaya Farms.
Alamea. Alamea.
Alamaya. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
um, yeah, hey everybody. So yeah, this one's cool. This just job was kind of one of our first big farms that contacted us and wanted us to come out there. Alamea Farms, it's about 80 acres. It's in the Cape Valley, which is just a stone's toss over the hill from Napa Valley, actually, where one of Brian's vineyards are at. But yeah, this was cool. This was this farm. The owner had purchased this property. It was kind of like he was retired and he was like, I want to get into farming, which is interesting. And so he bought this farm and didn't really know too much about what he was doing with like large scale farming. But he had a pretty good team on the ground. He had a pretty good farmer that he had hired and a bunch of farm hands. And he had gone through, he had dove into the idea of soil biology, and that was something that was like really capturing him. He's super into like structured water. He has a water structure for the entire farm. Go back. Oh, yeah, I guess here's a little picture of it, but
Some
sorry.
keep skipping it. Is it like someone else clicking it or is it me clicking it?
Yeah.
All right.
Um,
Okay.
But yeah, so he had an idea of biology. It was already organic. He didn't want to be using any pesticides or chemical fertilizers, anything like that. And so when we came in, he called us in because he was having a lot of issues. They were having almost complete failure to thrive with most of their veggies. They were a little bit timid in the beginning too because they were having such a hard time. They were only planting, a few patches of very specific crops, like 5 acres of carrot, 5 acres of potato, things like that. They were trying to limit overhead by just focusing in on a small section of crops. And so, yeah, because when we looked at that soil, we really didn't see anything going on in that soil at all. It was very, very compacted, just like Brian said. You couldn't get the penetrometer down into the soil at all. They were also buying all of their starts. They were buying starts, bringing them in, and they would get them there, and then immediately when they got them onto farm, boom, all the pests from that area would just start like getting the starts before they even made it into the ground. They were having a really bad, really hard, difficult time. So what we did, our first thing when we got there was they bought compost from Catalyst, and we basically set them up with an extraction station, got them the sprayers that they needed, and trained the entire crew there, which is like a really cool thing. A lot of farms, you can have a little bit of a difficulty getting in with the workers because they're doing the thing that they do all the time. But these guys at this farm were super interested at first. They kind of looked at us like we were kind of a little crazy or adding work to their workday. But they went along with it. That we trained them up, and they actually started applying. We actually came out and did, oh man, what was it, like 20 acres of persimmon and olive that we hand injected, and we did that twice in 1 year, just to start getting biology down into that soil. They were also running extracts pretty regularly. I believe they're putting them out every week throughout the growing season. And so yeah, they're going through that. That's that first year. They're getting, the systems are getting established. And at that point, they were like, you know what? We're going through a lot of compost. Why don't we just set up a compost facility right here on site? So we actually came out, helped them make a compost pad that's just as big as our company's pad. Like it's huge production facility for just this farm alone. And it's really neat. We get to use a lot of the input materials that are from the site. A lot of the old veggies or veggies that just can't be sold, we get to use into that composting system. And so yeah, it was really neat. We set them up, and we made a bunch of compost for them. And then we had Bradley, actually, if you can go to the next slide. just want to give you guys a quick overview of the farm here. Up at the top corner, there's that pasture mix square right next to the roots. That's where we ended up putting the compost slot in. And then down at the bottom, the persimmons, and on the right, the olives and figs. They had a massive late frost. I know Brian, actually, one of the farms he worked with, suffered the exact same thing. And so it was kind of cool because we had existing trees and a bunch of trees that had died. So we actually got to go back in and replant a bunch of the trees. I believe the olives and persimmons were I think they were 5 years old at the point. And when we got to go back in there, we actually got to put solid compost down into the holes when we planted. We got to, you know, get extract down onto those roots as they were going into the ground. Next slide, Raleigh. And literally those trees that, they were, I think, 1 year saplings, they have already caught up. In 2 years, they have caught up completely with the other trees. Some of them are actually performing better and doing better than the original trees that have been in the ground longer because they got that boost right at the beginning when they started off. A lot of the results that we were seeing from this, they had the ability to now start tilling in solid compost into their farm. It's because they were producing so much of it. Every time they pull a crop, they actually go in and are able to lay down, I think it's 5 yards per acre, somewhere in that range. But you can see in these pictures are side by side. These are a year and a half apart, these pictures here. The picture on the left, you can see the soil is completely white. Just looks kind of like sand clay. And then you move to the right there, you can see that dark soil profile underneath the veggies. You can actually see the color of the soil is actively changing. And it was really cool because we're changing that soil structure, we're getting biology in there. They've actually got the confidence now to where they plant, I think it's like almost 100 different varieties of crops on here. It's kind of like a market garden farm. It's not just hyper focused on each individual plants. They actually spread out the varieties. We're seeing huge reductions in pests. I think it was a lygus beetle that was absolutely decimating their eggplants and tomatoes. And this year, after, I think it's 2 years in now, they're still there, but the pressure of them has been significantly reduced. Very similar as to Brian did on the Napa vineyard, also running sheep through the fields before they retill in. They let the sheep go in there and actually eat what they're going to eat. They poop down on the ground, and then they go through and till in all the materials that they're not going once they're done harvesting. Also implemented owl boxes around the entire perimeter of the property. They have a huge ground squirrel and mole populations in that area, and it's pretty interesting how they have, because it's so wide open, there is no cover out there. The ground squirrels and everybody are starting to be pushed out of the actual growing space, and they're sticking to the outskirts. They're sticking to where they have tree coverage, to where they have high grasses and things like that to hide in. Over the last 2 years, like we've really seen like absolutely huge increases in production of veggies and basically figs, persimmons, and all of these things. So yeah, it's been a really neat transition out here at Alamea Farm. But yeah, I think that's it for me on this one.
I'll add just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying 2 years, and I think it's been a 5 or 6 year transition on this farm.
Right. Sorry. I was reading that.
It's hard to remember that when you look at these photos, because I think the before photo here, we're probably, gosh, 3 years in, because year one, there wouldn't be a pepper plant that would have grown. I mean,
No.
it was like, I don't know how to, I do have photos of it, but you put a plant in the ground and it just stays this big, maybe gets a few inches bigger and then produces a fruit. That's what was happening there. And then it was really through the years, every single year, the more that we would put the compost into the soil, we would see this really crazy acceleration. And I think it was about 2 years ago, Casey, when they really started blending it in. Because before they were big on the extracts and teas, we were trying to get away with like as little effort as possible. And we were seeing just great movement. This really mimics what Brian saw too. I love that you said it was when we first got to the property, or year one, I actually apologized to the landowner because I was like, I don't see a huge difference here. And I'm not sure if what we're doing is really having an impact when I look on the microscope. I don't think it is. The
Mm.
soil still looks the same, I guess. And his eyes lit up and he was like, no, Keisha, everything has changed. He's like, we have to keep moving forward. He's like, if you could go back to the upper map, Raleigh, it's like one, two back.
Okay.
That lower persimmon portion of the property at the very bottom, he said that the whole entire time he lived there, all the years before, when it would rain, a lake would form. And that lake would hang out all winter long into the spring. And as soon as we did the injections, the first injections, the lake would appear and then it would disappear immediately after the rain. Today, there is no lake. It just infiltrates. All the groundwater goes in. And so for him, he noticed the very first thing was that the soil was actually drinking up the water. So I think this is such an exciting project because really, if you look through this at this image, this was year one that you're looking at right now, and the soil was truly white. Like you can see in the tomato and egg area that it's like no weeds are growing at all. It's just white soil. You can really tell like where our best fertility is from the sky. Now, when you look at that soil, it's at least a little bit of a rich brown. So, yeah, this has just been an awesome project for us to watch the quality of vegetables, the color, the vibrancy, the flavor, and like Casey said, the diversity they're able to sell and plant now is just amazing. So, sorry for capping you off there. I just
No, it's
like
great.
I was like, oh, I
Great,
could
great,
talk about
great
this one for
coverage.
an hour.
You can skip forward, Raleigh.
All right. Look, it's my turn again. So community-powered land restoration. At Compost Academy, we all take our parts teaching different things. You can imagine Brian's working on large-scale farm transition. Casey talks a lot about large-scale compost production. And I really like the community aspect of things, the microorganisms, the really specific things that we do to grow the best compost that we can. And I think I appreciate this new addition to our classes. We've actually been teaching it since the very beginning of Compost Academy, but Casey and I have been teaching for a long time, and community wasn't always something that we structured into the educational program. But these people that you're looking at right now in this photo, they're called the Soil Sponge Collective. This is a tiny, tiny little piece of their group. They're actually huge. And I mean, you can imagine as Brian went through talking about all this work that they've done, the amount of compost that Alex buys every year, it's not cheap. The mistakes that are made trying to learn these lessons, it's expensive. Land restoration is expensive. And so, even if you're doing it on your own and with your own hands, making your own compost, it still takes your time. And if you're one of those people that just wants to wait for the land to restore itself, that's even more time. So it's always expensive. The community powered reality, like really bringing them into the focus, like your community, wherever you're at. For me, this has been a solution to how can we restore land without having a lot of money or a lot of time. And also, just the addition of fun and joy. So bringing joy to our work is absolutely important. When you're working on large scale farms, you're in a degraded landscape post fire. I don't care. It's depressing. Having a big group of people to laugh and to work with, it makes it a lot easier. So these guys, they actually taught me. These were all people that learned from Casey and I, gosh, must have been 6 years ago that they came to our first in-person workshop and we taught them how to make compost. They applied themselves. They continued to come to workshop after workshop. A lot of these folks are in the Compost Academy today because they have much bigger goals now. And so they're coming to have assistance to really make sure that as they're trying to make these transitions happen, they have the kind of support they need. And for me, like teaching is a two-way street. I think any teacher out there knows this, but it's like these guys taught me everything about how to actually make this work for the normal person, right? A lot of our clients are wealthy. That's just facts. But what if you're not, And this is just, yeah, go ahead to the next one, Raleigh. This has been how we've been able to get a lot of these next projects accomplished. So I will tell you right now, these are not Casey and I hands-on. These are our students. Actually, Johnny Allen, one of Compost Academy's own. This is He was a leader on this project. I know if he was here, he'd say he was only two hands out of hundreds or thousands that touched this land. But what we had to do with this was actually education. Casey and I taught them how to make their own compost, but they have been learning about permaculture and everything else for, years. So this is a thing. When you're using compost extracts, you're using compost teas, solid compost, no matter what. People will say this, what do you just expect to take microbes, throw them out on a desert and they're going to live? Well, no. I think you could expect for most of them to die if that's the reality. And I want to point to like it was our microbes that came into the system. We sprayed, we injected maybe one or two times. Everything else was what they did at home. And the big thing here that I feel like works and what I like about this story is it's a whole lot of teamwork, right? It's Casey and I coming in and helping them kind of understand how to get through the project, how to make moves in a smart and easy way. But it's really the soil sponge coming together and putting their hands in the dirt, boots on the ground that made this happen. So I'm not sure how long this transformation was. I think it was about 5 years, 6 years. But it went from a barren, I believe it was a lot of concrete back there. This is in downtown Hollywood. And it's a little apartment complex community called oh, keep skipping around.
Yeah, I don't know why. Keep skipping.
Called
Sorry
Hollywood
about that.
Orchard. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Um, and so it started out with just a whole bunch of concrete and a lot of people ripping things out of the ground. You can imagine not the best soil. Well, now 6 years later, you can see there's fruit trees everywhere. We were just there this spring and we were harvesting armloads of food. Do you want to go to the next one, Raleigh? So these are some more examples from that same neighborhood. A lot of the Soil Sponge Group, Hollywood Orchards, they all kind of hang out. And these are places, if you're in the Los Angeles area, you're in Southern California, get on Instagram, follow at the Bird House, at Hollywood Orchards. These guys love to play. They're always doing events, and you can get involved with this, actually. They love having new people come around. So these are some different yards and spaces just around that little neighborhood in the hills, right under the Hollywood sign. The one on the far left is someone's yard. Soil Sponge came in, built the compost. We sprayed a few times and injected. But yeah, just paying attention to mulch, paying attention to the soil quality. They've really restored that to a beautiful food forest in the backyard. On the right, far right, that's the same, a little garden that's just been completely transformed by compost alone. But what I want to focus on was the photo in the middle. The photo in the middle is we call it the triangle. And the triangle was an area of ground that was owned by no one but the state. If you look around in Hollywood, everyone has these epic, beautiful houses. They're landscaped to a T. They probably get a lot of chemicals poured on them every day because it's just, that's how they roll there often. This is in between two roadways. So you're seeing that little space in between the roads when you're driving along the highway and you're like, oh, that's pretty gross. So these guys saw that, and instead of just saying, hey, somebody should do that, they just fixed it. So Soil Sponge came in, they knocked on all their neighbors' doors. They said, we have a dream to make this tiny triangle thrive with beautiful plants. Do you want to help? And the neighbors were just like, absolutely, I'll give you water. Like, I'll help water on the weekends when you're on vacation. And, really, we came in, they altered the land, they put some good compost down. We injected and sprayed twice. And then I think the story goes, it just grew well. It's been watered a few times in the very first year. It's been 3 years now. And the after picture that you see there is that's what it looks like now. It's not cultivated. It looks like a wild area of mostly native plants, but it's not barren ground anymore. And it's very cool because everybody in the neighborhood was a part of what happened there. And so, that was changing the city they lived in without even taking tax money. And there was actually a great party that was wrapped around it, so it was really fun. Go ahead to the next one, Raleigh. This is the woodshed, and this is a totally different project. The woodshed is a high-end recording facility in Malibu, California. The clients that they host on the daily are expecting the place to look absolutely gorgeous. Go ahead next, Raleigh. That was actually a good move. This area was destroyed by the Woolsey fire in 2018. They were absolutely certain that the fire took everything. And when you talk about the woodshed itself, famous recording studio, super beautiful, not the important part. The most amazing part about woodshed is the woodshed gardens. And so in this picture that you look at, every area that you're seeing that is white ash were buildings. Every area that you're seeing that's green was a garden. And so the way that this property is situated was the garden wrapped, it hugged around the woodshed, which is a wooden building. They were absolutely certain it was all going to burn to the ground. But what it looked like was actually the plants protected the woodshed from burning down. So we came in 2 years post-fire. And as you can see in the picture, there's a lot of plants were dead. So they had to scrape the ground. They took all the topsoil off. I think they had to go 2 rounds because it was pretty toxic. Um, they 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 had some trees that still survived that just didn't really look that great. And when we showed up, I actually thought the garden looked pretty good. They'd already done new landscaping and all this. And truth was, the landowner knew that it wasn't great, that these plants could look so much better. So Casey and I provided a type of ground support. We would come in 4 or 5 times a year, which is excessive when we're talking about extract and spray. We don't usually extract or spray that many times on a residential property. Like Brian said, they did it twice a year. So we were really going above and beyond with this property, putting a lot more extract in place than you normally would. Do you want to go forward, Raleigh? Thanks. Oh, all right, back it up. All right, I like that. I guess the things are out of order. But so today, I just want to talk a little bit about what it looks like today, right? So when we got there, a lot of the trees, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're putting trees into highly compacted soil and they won't root. They kind of grow in the hole, but they don't root into the ground, so you can shake them around. There's about 15 trees that were acting like that. They'd been trying to get them to take root for those whole 2 years, and they weren't. Today, those trees are about this big around. They're epic, beautiful shade trees. I can say that the foliage has more than doubled because of their bill. So the amount of liquid that we have to spray on a property is directly related to the amount of, the square footage of biomass. Today, I have to spray like 3,000 gallons of extract or tea if I want to cover every bit of plant mass. So when you walk in there, you really get this aha, which is exactly what they're going for. So in, just a few years, I think it was very beautiful within 2 years. This, now it's absolutely stunning. Now we can go on, Raleigh. We did a lot of projects at this one property. We actually work on all their families' properties as well because it's just this is one of those jobs that it went so well that everyone that sees it is just like, I have to have this. So this is called Tiny Town. Tiny Town is that pile of ashes that you were just looking at. That's exactly it here. And they decided that they couldn't look at that barren ground anymore and remember their old house and all the memories. And so they actually talked to Casey and I, and they said, I got a challenge for you guys. You have 30 days. I want you to go from bare ground to a beautiful garden that is video worthy. We have a video crew coming to videotape it on this day. We want the entire garden to be movable because it's temporary. They're going to be building the house right back in that place in who knows how many years, and no concrete, right? And it has to be biological focused all the way. And so we did. We brought in the most insane amount of compost I've ever used on one job, something like 80 yards for that tiny little area. Absolutely every plant was dipped in extract. I mean, to the max. There's nothing toxic anywhere near it. And we hit our goal. It was gorgeous for the very first day of filming, which that photo unfortunately isn't here. What you're looking at now is what it looks like today. And it's just an easy garden that nobody has to mess with. It's got a fairy tale vibe. Next one, Raleigh. And this is the third part of the property, which we love to lovingly refer to as the valley. Um, this was completely barren when we got there. Unfortunately, we didn't get a drone shot. It was 6 years ago, and I just didn't have my drone on me. And it did start to restore pretty quickly. But when we first got there, there was absolutely no plants on the ground whatever. This is super steep hill. After the rains came, the first plants that came back were castor and mustard. And you can see there's a terrible, terrible access issue in this canyon. There's just hundreds and hundreds of stairs. Again, like our part to play here was microbe support. So we came in with very long lines, and we came up and down those hills and we walked across them and we sprayed everything and we injected every tree, and every time a tree got planted it was dipped in extract, and we also trained their crew on the ground, so they have a couple people that work in the garden. And so all this work, the labor of it, the change of it, was done by their team, not us. Our microbes, our extract, it was just the support to make that dream happen a little bit more easily. All right, next. Um, and this is kind of cool. Just a backup view of what this looks like today. Um, it's funny too because like the neighbor property there, Linda actually pays us to do their property as well because she doesn't like to have the not not healthy ground nearby. So they've restored that entire hill. And if you could take a camera and turn it all the way around, what you would see is all of her neighbors have not naturally restored. It hasn't really, plants aren't growing anymore. There's a few weeds that come and go with the seasons, but this landscape now mostly takes care of itself. There's still that job of cutting the plants back off of the access ways, but this is a stable ecosystem of native plants. And yeah, I think Raleigh has a little video.
All right, video time. I'm gonna figure out why this twitchy PowerPoint keeps flinging around, but here's the video.
Fire was November of 2018. The house burned, the 4 houses next door burned. The gully, which you'll see, burned all the way to the fence. As we inoculated, as we put compost down, covered with hay, added native seeds, and every year this ecosystem moves through its succession from bare soil back to this wonderful ecosystem. Once Casey and Keisha came down here to spray and inoculate, you could really see the difference.
What's incredible about this canyon project is that in a very short amount of time, the soil has become guarded, and now it's its own ecosystem, and it's slowly going to start restoring itself. So now the humans can start to back off on their labor just a little bit and let nature take over and start to do its job and create an ecosystem naturally. I thought about saying the same thing when the camera was on. I took a chance by not watching those videos first. All right, let's go
Fire
on
was no
project. Okay, Ramirez Canyon. So this was the big one, nearest and dearest to our hearts, the one we spent the most amount of time on. Um, I don't know if I've ever felt so overwhelmed. We showed up, and this is Malibu's has big, beautiful houses. This is an estate. So you can imagine if you're at the bottom of the hill, it looks something like these fancy castle gardens in Europe. And the homeowner, it had all burned, all the buildings were gone. But again, the landscape had stuck around. Most of the trees looked great. They were pulling them off their chemical diet, and they were basically refused, they cut them off and basically refused to never, ever give them food again. So the first thing we did on this property was go to the existing beautiful landscape and get the microbes in place. And honestly, they just took off. We didn't have to do much with, it's hardly even a before and after because it looked beautiful. And it still does. They just don't add chemicals now. Things are a little bit bigger. But the reality was when you would sit down in that courtyard and you would look up the hill, there was a line where everything was barren. They'd tried planting some trees. You can see the ones in the pictures on the before. That was when we first got started. But away from that hill is 18 acres of nothingness. Literally, the only plants that were growing were mustard and thistle and castor. They'd brought in a lot of different people because the landowner knew he made a mistake. After the fire, he wanted to see his ground. There was a lot of rubble and burned bushes and branches. And he actually took a D6 bulldozer and just bulldozed everything out. So then when he brought in some consultation, they immediately told him, the bad thing that he'd done. Hey, you just removed every bit of topsoil post-fire, and this is going to be very hard to restore. We're talking about we're down, way below where there was any topsoil at all. If there ever was any to begin with, this is a very sandy property. So he felt bad, and what he really wanted, his goals were loose. It was like I really want this to look beautiful. I'd like some sort of landscape. So when we walk around, drive around the property, we have something to see and, admire. I would like it to be ecosystem focused. I want to bring my soil back. And the next thing was that he would like to keep it relatively inexpensive. So when you're talking about restoring 18 to 20 acres of absolute bare ground that's primarily sand, that's it's quite the bill. So over time, what we did was we just worked with nature. We were on this project for 6 years. First thing we did was access. The second thing we did was making sure that the water would stay in the ground. One of the biggest problems that anyone with bare ground in Southern California, or I guess in the world, has when it rains is the flooding and the erosion. So sometimes 15 or 20 feet of the gully were being chunked away. We were seeing huge ditches being formed just in one small rain. So a lot of our work was slowing water down, covering the ground with wood chips, and then just applying the microorganisms to the plants that were there and awakening the seed bed. And so what you see in this is, obviously on the left, that's quite cultivated. That's the orchard area. That's where we've planted food trees and tried to establish a little bit more of a cultivated look. On the right, that's the gully, the canyon, whatever you want to call it. It was that barren part of the land that was just chunking off and losing land every year. So today, the entire property is walkable. I think we might, is there another go forward? Yeah. So, today the property on the left, yeah, that's the photo right there. Few trees alive, nothing more. And, today there's trails up and down and throughout the canyon. When it rains, we might get a little bit of water flow to where you would see a little bit of a trickle down in the creek, but everything is so guarded by plants and stones and organic material that we never get mudslides anymore. We don't lose any land when it rains. And I guess I could point out in this picture, when you look up the hill, up that canyon, it's hard to see, but it's quite steep. And up above that is a whole lot of concrete, maybe 3 acres of concrete on a steep hill. So when it would rain, the neighbor, a full river, like an actual river of mud and debris will come down that hill and just hit the top of the property and then erode down. We did put in 3 decent-sized dry ponds at the top where it sinks and collects that water. And I don't have it's really hard to get good after photos of the whole property today because everywhere you go, the canopy is wrapped around you. So you can see me in that picture looking up at the trees. And it's been a challenge for me on this particular project to get the scope of before and after because today it's just green absolutely everywhere. What's the next one, Raleigh? Oh yeah, here we go. We do have a good before and after. Okay, awesome. So when you look up at the top now, that was that angle that you were looking where it was totally barren. It's you probably can't see my mouse, but at the very, very tippy top of the property, and then if you follow the fence line down, those were the 2 areas where we actually put the ponds, and all of those native plants just sprouted from the ground as soon as the water was there. And so I guess that's what I want to point out is here we didn't have a big team on the ground. We weren't training his crew on how to get things done. We were bringing in groups of workers every once in a while to do what we would call big movements. And those movements would be things like covering the ground, trying to stop erosion in one place. And then we would wait for the seasons to change and see how we did, and then update our techniques from there. It was very effective. It's beautiful. And we have kept it relatively inexpensive, in comparison to what it would look like at the woodshed or any of those other properties that we were talking about. I think that's it. Was that the end? Ah,
Last but not least, we got a video. Video time. All right. And all of these videos, we're making these all into complete 10 to 15 minute case study videos. So this is all just stuff that we hobbled together in the last day or two, but we really want to release these full videos in the next, hopefully before wintertime. So here it is. There we go.
I purchased the property, I think about 6 months after the Woolsey fire. This whole area up here was all undeveloped. It was dirt. What would you call it?
A desert,
Yeah.
I think is the word for it.
Yep. Keisha and Casey were recommended, and I started researching a little bit about regenerative gardening. We came up with a plan. A combination of things, compost and compost tea spraying.
Well, I think that's what was great was you gave us a little bit of free reign to figure out how to start repairing the problem. And so that was the first thing we did was just to keep the water in place. The next thing was pretty simple. We just put the wood chips down.
Right.
That was shocking. And then
Right.
suddenly we got a lot of weeds, tumbleweeds, bull thistle, mustard. Mustard was your nemesis.
Yeah,
And now
yeah.
you can see, well, there's plants everywhere. You can see hundreds of birds swooping over our head right now. It's definitely an ecosystem. I think what was really impressive was, you know, Dan really wanted to focus on nature first. So a lot of the things that we looked at when we were making decisions were, one, is it going to be aesthetic? But two, is it going to be a habitat for a multitude of different animals? And there's cameras all over this property. We see coyotes, we see bobcats, we see deer. Let's just chat really quickly about why you didn't go with the traditional method of just calling a landscape company, spraying glyphosate, putting on chemical nutrients.
You know, we're looking for an organic way to treat the property and improve it and not over irrigate. I mean, so we really tried to select natives and plants that either require minimal water or eventually can survive more or less on nature. If you look down there, that's a very English garden looking vibe. We wanted it to sort of blend and transition, and I talked to Keisha and Casey about that, and I think it's going quite well.
All right. Well, folks, that again, Keisha and Casey, you guys pulled off such an epic feat with that property. I think being actually at Ramirez Canyon was so inspiring to me to be like, oh my gosh, this is the power of soil biology. This is the power of extract. And of course, your guys' labor and your guys' great design. It's really showed me it's like this is not just something that converts gardens and farms. This restores entire ecosystems. This is the ingredient of life. And you guys help restore that to this place that I never thought was possible after a wildfire. So again, you guys inspired me as much as I hope everybody here was a little bit inspired by that story. You got it. All right. So last thing, we're going to get to the Q&A soon, but before that, we want to share an opportunity for folks who want to learn and who want to learn this themselves. You've seen what's possible with soil biology and compost, but let's jump into it. Like, why don't we show you? We want to show you how you can learn these processes yourselves to do it in the land you care about. So we have this event. We did it last year. It was super fun. It's coming up again this year. It's called the Compost Academy Retreat in Costa Rica. Last year we did it at Finca Luna Nueva. This we're doing in a really cool cloud forest farm called Rancho Margo. And this is coming up and you can register right now for it. So some of the topics we'll be teaching, practical soil food web studies, a lot of the things you'll hear a lot about the theory, with Elaine Ingham teaches at Soil Food Hub School, but we're also going to go into a lot of the practical Soil Food Hub applications. Of course, you're going to hear so much about composting, thermophilic, vermicomposting, static composting. We've got a really great chunk dedicated to soil microscopy. We've got some really good lessons on compost extract and teas, taught by Brian himself. Working farm applications. We're going to show you guys kind of what it's like working as a soil consultant and an overview of running a soil consultant business. A lot of great success stories like what we've shared today. Some of the technologies from how you go from small scale to large scale composting, tropical permaculture, because of course we're at a really beautiful permaculture location, and then really how to scale up, whether you're at the smallest backyard farm or whether you have 100 acres or more. And so some of the things that processes you'll learn here, you're going to learn how to have biological composting techniques that could fit your climate, your land size. You're going to gain the experience to make your own compost extracts and teas. You're going to learn about how biology is applied on a real working farm. You're going to get hand-on microscopy training. So even if you're kind of new to it, Keisha, Casey, Brian, and I, and even all the students there are going to help you get oriented with a microscope so you actually feel comfortable doing it. And we're going to look at some really great examples that we're going to collect from all across the farm. And last but not least, you're going to be part of this really awesome network of people that work with the soil practitioners, composters, farmers. And these are people who are so enthusiastic. And that's one of the greatest pieces of often a lot of us are alone doing this. We don't have a lot of people to talk to about it. We're all gathering together in one place to learn about composting and soil biology and restoring land together. And it will be a really fantastic experience being a part of this soil tribe together for this time. And of course, at this retreat, it's a really awesome vacation. It's a learning, adventure, vacation experience. So you're going to have a great time learning, but also you're going to be in a really beautiful place where you're not going to forget. It's going to be a vacation, adventure, and a way to really upgrade your skills. So some of the bonuses, of course, we got included here. Beyond just workshops and lectures, we have so much more. There's farm tours that everybody's going to get. There's a chocolate making workshop everybody's going to take part in. There's a really epic final afternoon hot springs trip we all take and have a really nice dinner. Everyone's going to have access to natural pools, hiking, yoga, and adventure tours if they want to. And of course, everybody gets their meals and transport included from the second you step off your plane all the way to the when you go back home if you want to. So let's talk value. Like, oh, it's so it can be an investment. However, we put this together because we know you're going to walk away feeling like this is something you're going to keep benefiting from for years, if not the rest of your life. So you're going to save thousands of dollars compared to other soul training workshops out there and other courses. Biggest of all, you're going to save hundreds of hours making your own mistakes by learning these processes from Keisha, Casey, and Brian. You're gonna have 6 nights of lodging in a really beautiful eco lodge and farm. You're gonna have organic farm raised meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, transportation included. Oops, it's meant to make Rancho Rago, not Finca Luna.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have this really good opportunity to network. You're gonna be immersed in cloud forest biodiversity, and you're gonna have a really amazing practical learning experience. And you're gonna get discounts on all the other Compost Academy offerings, courses, and programs we have coming up. So all of this is happening right now. We have this early bird offer coming now until November 10th. If you act now before November 10th, you're going to get $300 off the normal price, which is $2,300, and you can get this all right now for $2,000. So that's all included there, the entire package, and you can get it right now on the website Compost Academy, compost.academy/Costa Rica, and I think is our little resource link there. Otherwise, I'll post in the chat box, but there should be like a little resource link that
I do. It
has
says
that.
in my, yeah, I
Nice.
think so. In resources, right? It just
Yeah.
pops.
So for folks, we
Okay.
really want to help you join. Last year we sold out. We got 30 people, and this year, we're capping it again at around 28 to 30 people. Anything above 28, we keep as scholarship tickets. So we'd love to have everybody join us and learn this awesome art form of composting. And so for people who really want to dive deeper into microscopy, we have this thing coming up in December called the microscopy course. So it's going to be 6 weeks of guided microscopy training and self-guided lessons with Keisha, Casey, and Brian, a really awesome community and challenges to help you increase your microscopy skills. And you're going to be looking at samples. It's going to be a really good time to be comfortable with the microscope and actually learn how to understand what you see in your soil, what you see under the microscope, the organisms, the relationships, the practical uses of the things you learn about the soil food web. And so this is going to come up in December, but right now you can join it, you can pre-enroll. That's a bill for $750. And the last thing I'm going to share about with you guys is if you want to jump into this all right now, if you don't want to learn yourselves and you need someone to guide you on your farm, on your land, of course, you can work with Keisha and Casey and Brian directly. There's Soil Matters is the consulting company that Brian, Keisha, and Casey have that they'll show you how to build these compost systems on your farm. They'll show you the practices and techniques and tools you'll need to implement these systems. And they'll really put you in a really good spot of implementing the best practices so you don't have to do this yourself. And that, of course, is infinite value. That's years of time. That's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment and time invested into these systems. And if you want to buy this compost directly, that's also available right now at catalystbioamendments.com. This is the compost that's built all the landscapes saw in this webinar. It has the amazing biology that can restore landscapes at scale. So if folks want to get these, if you're in North America, you can get that directly. I think US specific, where I think it's limited to the US, but you can get that right now at Catalyst Bioamendments. So,
Continental US, no
Yeah.
Canada.
continental
No,
US.
no Alaska or
Let's go
No
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Alaska or Hawaii
Wah,
for
wah,
sure.
wah.
Apparently it's illegal.
Yeah. Well, folks, well, how won't we open this up to Q&A right now? Because I know there's probably some good questions out there we want to get asked. And of course, everybody, there's a Q&A box down below. You can raise your hand and we'll unmute you if you want to ask a question live. But let's get to some questions now.
Yeah.
All right. I
Well, there was
think
a couple in the chat.
yeah, a couple in the chat. I see this first one from Sophia Brown. Thank you for all these webinars. I was wondering about the volume of biocomplete compost that's being applied in the vineyard of this size. Approximately how many yards per acre or gallons per acre for liquid per application? How often are applications? Thank you very much. Nice. It's a very good
Yeah, so
detailed.
the different properties have different requirements or needs, and also the different phases of the growing cycle. So, like, I'll give you Placerville as a good example. When we started the process of applying compost directly to the soil and kind of working it in, because again, we had to kind of condition the soil, I think we ended up with, shoot, it was almost 20 yards of bulk compost that we put down. And then I think we purchased 5 yards of biological compost to do all the planting and extracts in order to plant the vineyard. And I think right now, probably management wise, we're roughly in the neighborhood of about 2 to 3 yards per year is all we use to make extracts and teas to facilitate a vineyard of 10 acres in size. And really, we should say 11 acres because it's not just the vineyard that we're treating it now. We're treating also all the hedgerows and all those spaces that we've created these habitats inside of. So relatively not too bad, between 2 and 3 yards for 10 acres of land. When we go to the Napa facility, that one required a lot less to start with, simply because it was already established vineyard. We weren't going through a planting or a soil rehabilitation, where we mechanically really manipulate the soil. And there we only use compost extracts and compost teas. And it's a much smaller property. It's 5 acres in total size in the Napa. And I think we use between about a yard to a yard and a half of compost in that facility. So relatively not a lot is required, especially when you start getting to the liquid amendments. When you're using extracts or teas, you can actually make that stretch quite a ways. When you need to add compost into the soil directly, like in a planting or reconditioning the soil, that's when you start to use a large volume of compost.
I can confirm that he buys about 2 yards for each farm. So it just depends. Sometimes he goes spring and fall, and sometimes he actually just buys it in more bulk once a year. So, but it's really the amount of compost that Alex has been purchasing has come down substantially over the
Very
years.
much.
Right.
I
You
almost
know,
think he's just doing it to do it, just to hedge his bets on powder mildew.
totally. I think so. I think you're
Because
right. I
that
mean,
looks pretty good.
and it was interesting, Keisha, when you were talking about, your portion about the ecosystem and with Dan, having that kind of conversation. It's the same thing. I mean, really, at the end of the day, the work that we are really truly doing is around ecosystem restoration. And you can fit that into a landscape like the Ramirez Canyon, and you can also fit that in agriculture. You have to be a little bit more strategic about it in the sense that you have a huge monocrop kind of thing that you're growing, but where can you also polyculture a lot of things to kind of bring in that ecosystem? And it's so amazing to see ecosystem changes. It really kind of locks into place. And you mentioned something in there which really key. The amount of labor that goes into managing a system that's gotten to kind of stability is just so much different. And that kind of speaks to just like you just said about the significant reduction in cost, because he's having to apply less labor and less management to that property because it's already now functioning.
Usually, yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. How often do we get a job where it's just like, don't worry about cost, just save the environment?
yeah, right. Yeah,
Hasn't happened to me
right.
yet.
Not yet.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for that job, if anyone here.
exactly.
Compost a yard, meters, let's see. Yeah, I think it would be 1 cubic meter is close to a yard, yeah? 1.5 cubic meters.
Yeah, a cubic yard and a cubic meter are fairly close. A cubic meter is slightly bigger, but it's pretty close. I'm trying to think of it in liters. I don't know if I know that off the top of my head. But yeah, like 27 cubic feet is a cubic yard. 100 or 1,000. No, yeah, 1,000 liters is a cubic meter.
Yeah, right, right.
Because it's the metric system, it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Citrus had a question that was relative to the one that had Sophia, and I didn't answer her part of her question, which was how much extract do we actually apply?
Mm.
And so typically when we are making an extract out at the Placerville, so the 10 acres, we'll usually brew about 100 gallons of extract at a time. And then we'll use that 100 gallons for the entire 10 acres. So really about 10 gallons to the acre, if you were kind of to break that down. And Alex, I think he's applying about 5 times a year as far as extracts and 3 times a year with teas. And so that's about the application rate and about how often we apply. And, I think over time too, like I think Keisha's mentioned, he's kind of more hedging his bets because I don't think he has to apply as much extract anymore, but he's doing it. And I mean, it's paying off as far as the results in the vineyard. It's just really, really thriving. So.
That's always the balance, right? It's like, I mean, you even see it with the water rejection stuff. It's like, it's going really well right now. Do I really want to drop it another 30% or another 10 for, like,
Right.
the landscape's looking great. Like, do I really want to stop applying extract because it might not look good in the future? It's a big jump to just be like, the ecosystem's in check. I'm
Right.
gonna leave it alone now.
Yeah. And I just know from my own experiences, I had a homestead in Northern California that by the time, I felt like the ecosystem was really stable, like really resilient and very, very stable. I mean, in reality, I sprayed our property maybe twice a year, and that was about it.
Mhm.
And even then, I feel like I could probably go a year or two without actually doing anything. It still probably would maintain fantastic, but I still felt like, okay, at least twice a year. I felt like that
Like I
felt
spent all
right to
this
me.
money on a big sprayer. I might as well use
Right. No
it.
doubt, right?
I feel like
Yep.
in landscape too, yeah, right? Like, it can be a little bit different. Like sometimes like landscapes we want to move like very rapidly. So like, when we're in a city or, we're working on like a really nice garden area or something like that, people want like progress now, it's not something you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to wait and see how my harvest does at the end of the season, or, you're not really going to be testing like sap analysis or anything like that on your grass or your rose bushes or whatever it is, right? So yeah, like hitting it a little bit heavier when you're doing like a landscape type space, because we've even done upwards of 1,000 gallons an acre of extracts, excuse me, like on a front yard that was looking pretty bad, and we just wanted to get in there, get it going, get that shift happening really quickly. So yeah, it really depends. It's super situational. Like every farm is different, every yard is different. Like how that yard has been treated is different. So yeah, there's big swings in the amount that you can use, and a lot of it is dependent on what the person paying you is looking for, and what the end goal is.
Yeah. The goal for sure. I mean, the olive project I mentioned with Irvine Company, we're right now putting 15 gallons per tree, you
Yeah.
know,
Wow.
and we're doing that
That's a
once
lot
per
of extra.
month right now. It's a lot of extract, but we're trying to remediate really sick trees. So the goal is how can we turn sick trees around? Because these trees are expensive. I mean, they cost
Yeah.
many thousands of dollars per tree, right? So it's like, okay,
I
it's
was gonna
worth it.
say that even where we were working in Malibu, though, some trees are like 80 years old. It's just like,
Yeah.
and they're looking a little sickly, and so yeah, we've put like 80 gallons on a single tree before, and so it's like, yeah, it
In
really depends on the landscape.
Tiny Town, it was like all of that compost went into one. We had a dump truck dump it in space, and
Yeah,
they
it
just
wasn't
faked it
wasn't all
out and
our
like
compost. It was a
mixed
good
it
like
with the soil.
it was a good compost
We
from
like
local, but
engineered a soil. It was crazy, and it moved so fast,
Yeah.
so
like
fast.
within weeks, it was like boom.
Yeah, it was insane.
Does everyone ever ask you guys, like, listen, I have a redwood grove. It's priceless. Easy
Yes.
to inject. They have. Awesome. Okay.
Yes, yeah, no, we did that too. It was another home in Malibu. It was like friends of friends, and they were like, their insurance company was getting ready to like force them to cut a tree down if it didn't start doing better because it was right next to the house and it was like this really cool twisted pine. And yeah, we went and dude, we dumped I think like 3 or 4 times like 150 gallons on that tree of extract, just injecting like 1,000 ports all around that root system. And yeah, it came back. It came back. It started looking better. They didn't have to cut it down because it was like their prized tree. It was like this perfect tree that matched the house and was like right there. So yeah, like yeah, we get the hot shot calls sometimes. It was literally the only thing we treated there for like the first 4 or 5 times we went.
Yeah, we don't have redwoods in Southern California or the part of Northern California where we're at right now. So it's usually sycamore trees or like some sort of cedar that someone's like, or an olive tree. We get those crazy olive tree transplants all the time, when they take an old massive tree and just rip it out of the ground and stick it. That's the project Brian's working on right now, actually, is getting data on, how much more valuable is it to add microbes to these the things people do.
Right,
Yeah, I
right.
mean, like you think of these ancient trees, imagine going out to the places where it's like olive trees as old as like biblical times. Like there are like crazy old olive trees out in the Middle East. I think that they're struggling. Imagine if you guys got a contract for like extracting on these ancient trees, like or saving the Methuselah tree. Imagine that one. Like how,
Methuselah's hidden.
Yeah.
yeah,
Whew. Pressure's on, right?
I want to get a job with Methuselah to get the little X on there so I can hike there.
Right, exactly. I know
I'm
what
kind of
you're.
obsessed
lens
with that
cutting.
tree, actually.
Oh, yeah, yeah, no doubt. I've hiked up in that area, but you don't know, right? It's like it could be that one. It could be that one. It could be this one.
Yeah, yeah.
I would imagine there'd be like streamers all over it with people like Methuselah tree.
Oh, they purposely. It's a closely
Yeah,
guarded secret. Yeah.
smart, very smart.
Yeah.
All right. Well, another question from Sue. Has anyone tested the nutritional density of the grapes at the Whitesides vineyard?
No, we have not, but there's some things though that maybe are adjacent to that. One is, and this is subjective, but it comes down to the winemakers, the people who are actually buying the grapes. And in the video, one of the winemakers said it's electric. There's really even more descriptors around that. In fact, there's a variety in Placerville that a particular winemaker only makes that particular varietal. I think it's Chenin Blanc. And so he buys Chenin Blanc from all these different vineyards that are out there, and he typically blends them together, and then he makes his Chenin Blanc, vintage. And he tasted the grapes coming off of Alex's property and said, "Wow, this tastes so much different from all the other Chenin Blanc grapes that I'm buying. I'm not going to blend it. I'm going to make its own separate label just for this one." So I mean that right there is a proof point that comes back and says, okay, we're doing something here that's really causing that terroir, that flavor of the land, really to make it distinct. The other really cool thing about this in the natural wine community is trying to avoid adding any commercial yeast, trying to use the wild yeast to be able to do the fermentation process because that also changes the flavor. And there's a score called the YAN score, and it's yeast something or other. I don't remember exactly what the acronym stands for. But they measure the amount of wild yeast that are on the grapes. And the grapes coming off of Placerville don't require any commercial yeasts at all. They have a high enough YAN score where they just naturally ferment. And so that's another real big advantage of saying, hey, look, we have created this ecosystem again that's going to support this kind of community of microbes plus flora and fauna that are out there. And that's just a benefit to the winemaker. So yeah, I mean, it's those kind of positive things are coming back. I'd love to be able to see what the nutrient density is and see what the difference is between that and a conventional grape that's out there. And I'm sure there's a difference. And, it's one of those things. I've been around this enough where you can taste a plant that, or a product like an apple or whatever of the fruit that's coming off of a property that's grown biologically versus conventionally, and there is a huge difference in flavor. And I really think that's due to there's a big difference in nutrients that are in that particular plant. So again, subjective, but I'd love to be able to see more testing done in that space.
I'd say at Alamaya Farms, like the difference in the flavor, like flavor was good to begin with, but now like it's just so much more robust. The colors, like there's all these things that you can experience, like taste, eyesight, or the waxiness of the,
Mhm.
the peppers, like all this. You've been able to observe it over time. Like, I mean, how much does it cost to get a nutrient analysis? Is there a,
Last I heard it was kind of expensive, like an eight hundred
that's what I
dollar
thought too.
range. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It'll be nice when they get that meter to the place. So, you know what I'm
oh
talking about?
yeah, yeah. What Dan Kittredge, I think
Yeah. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
working
They
on
go in
that.
the
Yeah,
grocery
yeah,
store and you,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Doody,
Yeah.
hi,
I
Nutella.
used to say it would be great one of these days we have a tricorder that could be able to just point it at something and say,
That's right.
that's the first
Oh,
version of
the
the
Star
tricorder
Trek
coming out.
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Clip, clip. Nice. All right. Well, okay, here's one from Zebit. Um, Again, pardon if I'm slaughter the pronunciation of your name from Kosovo. So he's asking, what materials do you use for the compost? Well,
Good
also Zebit,
question.
before we also have a whole intro course where we talk about compost. I'll put the link in, but go ahead, Keisha.
Yeah, there's a free class we just put together just for folks that want to explore more. Um, it's going to depend on where we're at, what our ingredients and inputs are. So, um, without like exhausting everyone with information, I'll just say like diversity is something that we're looking for and always, always. And then we are using woody material, typically wood chips, not always. Not all locations across the globe have access to wood chips. So you could think about durable stems and sticks as a replacement for wood chips if that's not available in your area. There's always a slow nitrogen or a green component. Think long cut grass or green leaves or vegetable waste. And then we have what we call a fast nitrogen component that's going to be something like brewery waste or seeds, manures, things like that that make the pile hot. So basically, those are the three categories, but every single different pile we build is a little bit of a puzzle. So yeah, that's a lot of the work is spending time in the beginning using the microscope and using all the tools we have to really develop our compost processes so we're very secure in them. And then after that, it gets a little bit easier to use whatever ingredients we want. Anyone
Covered
else?
covered it.
No, I think that yeah. And I think there's a question from John that's kind of relate to this, Keisha, if you want to handle that one too. So John asks about concept project. Remove alien invasive plants, mostly black wattle, and restore traditional rangelands for communal grazing using compost/extracts plus biochar. How can we make biocomplete compost from the twigs and leaves of the wattle, or will we have to bring in extraneous compost and biology?
Yeah, so in that situation, you might need to bring in some inputs. It's really rare that we have a farm. It's usually actually on a farm that has animals or grain production. Sometimes we're lucky enough to meet people that really, have all of the ingredients right in place. But if you want to make thermophilic compost, which I feel like you probably do just because of the nature of the weediness and that it's invasive, you might need to bring in other inputs. But if you wanted to go about it in a different way, you could really think about the plant and where it's at in its life cycle and make sure it's not seeding. I don't know the nature of that plant, if it's one of the ones that you can cut up into little pieces and it reroots. In that case, we always need to heat the material. But we talk about this a lot in Compost Academy. You can use things like vermicompost, worms. You can use the static compost. There's a lot of different ways to grow microbes that are not thermophilic compost. And when we're talking about an at-home project, it's legal to do that kind of composting system. So for me at Catalyst Bioamendments, I'm kind of cut off from being able to use static or well, vermicompost I could, but there's a lot of rules around thermophilic compost for good reason. But yeah, at home, there's a lot of options that you would have for creating a pile out of your weeds. And I guess one idea I would add is like, if you really do have to bring in more diversity from outside, maybe find a friend that also has weeds that they want to deal with. Because composting weeds, composting the invasives is just, I mean, it's a great use. These plants grow fast, they grow furiously, they cover acres, and so a lot of the times I'm really grateful for them because they are biomass. And I'll tell you, at my house, in the beginning, not my house right now, but in a lot of the projects I've done, because this house doesn't even grow weeds. My weeds in the beginning are my blessing. I can make compost, I can make mulch, and then over time, my ecosystem shifts and the weeds stop growing. And then I really do have to bring in outside resources, um, to add to my compost pile unless I'm getting enough from the garden. So, yeah.
It's a great point because this is a conversation that comes up all the time with our students at school, which is, it's easy to get locked in and say, what is the best method for composting? And in reality, the more the mindset should be is, what are all the available ways that I could make compost? And then figure out what works best for that particular situation. Because it would be great for thermophilic, like using those invasive weedy species, and you have seeds you want to be able to terminate, thermophilic. But in other cases, it'd be like, oh, you don't have to deal with that problem. Static is a good way to go. There's so many different ways to be able to do composting or create these microbes. And that's really the whole thrust of this is you just need to have all those tools available to you. You need to understand what the tools are and then apply the right tool at the right time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what makes sense for your space and your
Yep.
resources.
Cool.
All right. Well, that's the lesson that. Oh wait, thanks. You should something to add.
Thanks,
Oh,
Keisha.
is it Raleigh something to add? Yeah, about the. I mean, you're talking about biochar, right? I mean, it's one part of it. It's like biochar has to be mixed with compost for it to be effective. It's just a house. It's not the actual like biochar isn't the biology. It's just like it has to be mixed with these amazing processes of biology for it to be somewhere effective. Like if you just slapped biochar onto a landscape, it would just sap it for a long time until the biology just kind of like crawled in. And that's like it's always a good concept where it's like biology and compost together are great, but like biochar without compost, without biology, it's just an empty house.
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's a tool. Biochar can be used. We talk about biochar a lot. Brian actually had a really cool side project that he did using biochar as a way to spread his seeds out, like disperse them more. But it's a tool. You don't have to use biochar. The advertising in the world today would have you just layer on all the different practices, but really it's about goals. And at the school, that's where we start is goals. Like often we can get ourselves just in a tizzy worked up about what we're gonna do. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do everything. But in reality, it's not easy to use every single tool at once, and sometimes it's not even appropriate. So with really good planning and really good understanding of all the tools, like we're always saying, like how do we make our biochar? Wait, how do we make our char bio?
Yeah, exactly.
These are all things we talk about, and it
Yeah.
it is important. You could think because someone will sell you biochar, it'll be dry and in a bag, and you throw it on the ground, and it really could have the opposite effect as you want it to. So all these biological systems take a little bit of thought, but I think we've shown today, like over and over again, that we can use a lot of different tools. There's a lot of variation in the way that we can work with these properties. We can work on almost any sort of ecosystem, and that's really what it is ecosystem restoration. So, yeah, I think for that project you're talking about, there's a lot of different things that you could do, and it would be fun to get more into the specifics, exactly what is that? What does your project look like? And that's it. Like at the Compost Academy, we also have challenges every week where we ask you to actually do stuff. We want to
Right.
see pictures of your projects. We want to hear
Improve.
how you're feeling, what you're thinking about it, where you're getting hung up. It's very interactive in that way. So it's cool. You can actually take your project, like this project you're talking about, and get started at step one. What's my goal? All the way through to, I've got all the tools to create the compost. I know how to extract. And then one of our last classes is planning for the year so that you can really get everything in order. Another cool thing that we started after class one was you don't have to leave. So everybody can just keep going through the program every time we run it. So our very first students, they were an amazing group. And I think probably about 5 or 6 out of 25 have hung on to continue through the second program. So they're doing their second round of challenges. They've actually taken the program, grabbed a new goal because last they accomplished their goals from last time. They got a new bigger goal now, and they're running it through the program again. So I don't know. Very cool. There's a lot of different ways to go about it.
They've become compost legends.
Let's
Megan,
hope.
Domingo, Dan. Their
He was
names
already a
echo in
legend.
eternity.
He
Yeah.
didn't need us.
Oh, by the way, we really love like there's the raise hand function that allows us to unmute you. And again, if anyone has any remaining questions, we're almost at the end, but would love to hear your voice. It's basically a free console. Who wouldn't turn down a free console? You might as well raise your hand and ask a question in person. Um, But if truly no one has any more questions, we could close it out. I guess my thoughts were, yeah, in the Ramirez Canyon, one really cool thing was that seeing you guys, you worked with water too. So you had the entire system as part of it. You had water capture and compost extract and planting. My gosh, how did you balance all those systems? Like, were you going in excavators first, or were you trying to do it all at the same time?
Mm.
Like, how did you plan out the phases of that?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. I think I spent more time thinking and observing the current ecosystem that was there than actually doing. So we spent a lot of time on the land, paying attention to water flow, paying attention to the animals that were already present and the plants that were already present. And I mean, I'm not trying to sound woo-woo here, but it really kind of it was the land just really directly led us to what needed to happen. And when I say that, I mean I could visually see these huge gouges in the ground. And so I would, look at the lay of the land and think, okay, where's this coming from? Trace it up the hill, sink it in. I feel like we were very lucky in the way, and it's probably not luck, actually. This is probably the natural ecosystems just and the way that this works. But with us just influencing it a little bit, nature would take over. So it's like, like I said, we dug these dry ponds. I was expecting there to be overflow and, it to maybe be a difficult situation. We did a little bit of math, but the amount of water that comes off is astounding. But what really happened was, I mean, as soon as we dug those holes, the water just settled into them and stopped flowing over the top. As soon as we laid wood chips down on bare ground, plants started growing. Our only job was to take away what we didn't want, nurture what's there, take away what we don't want. And then every once in a while, when the rain was coming, I'd just throw native seeds. And again, I think the birds have a lot to do with spreading, the ground squirrels. Like, I would put work in one little area, like I'm going to plant poppies right here. And then next year there'd be poppies everywhere. I didn't plant them, I didn't plant them. So I give a lot of the credit to just like nature being awesome and us just spending a little bit of time to like listen on that property. All the other properties we did were like, come in, do the thing, get it done. It was like Ramirez was different. It was slow. It was
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
there was a little bit of that though, where it's like, yeah, we had to like bring machinery into a place that's like already kind of semi-established gardens. And you got to be like hyper careful with everything. And so there was tons of playing in and out of, getting to break ground on like something that's untouched and like other places where you're just like trying to key into things that already exist. Dan kind of mentioned that about blending that like English style garden to like semi-wild, it was like it was actually kind of a difficult thing to do, so we had to do a bit of work right there at that transition stage. But yeah, no, like Keisha said, a lot of it was like just giving space for nature to do its thing and then just kind of tending it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
They didn't have a really great goal. They didn't have a well-defined goal at the time. And, for us too, I knew goals were important, but this is so many years ago. It wasn't like in there, I didn't really push them to say, and I think we're, again, lucky that it turned out really well. And everyone's happy with what it looks like because it was kind of like, I made a joke in that video. I mean, he really gave us a lot of freedom. So
Just make it
yeah.
look good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
That was
very
the
subjective,
goal.
too, isn't it? So happy he's okay with a lot of native plants because that's what's going on.
Right. Right.
Yeah, such a wildly varying landscape. The bottom, where there was that burned down, it literally looks like a Hollywood movie set. It looks like something out of The Godfather, like what's left of
Yeah.
the pool, because that all burned down. But then you go up, it's just more magical, raw nature the higher you get in that landscape, which is really fun.
Yeah.
All right, Aletta, I guess this could be the last question of today. How have you been able to consult? Have you been able to consult at all with California government officials to in charge of
Charge.
restoration?
In charge, no, no. Um, let's see, what could I say? Just recently, honestly, like one of our students, new student, she's incredible. She wrote a bill in California that opened up the legality of composting. So before she wrote this bill, it was illegal for farmers to bring in materials from offsite and sell compost. which this is something that we do all the time as a business. We go build for farmers. And one of the problems is that they can't really make any money off of it. So she's just opened up this kind of new space for us where now farmers, really anyone who's a landholder, can make X amount of compost, a decent amount, and sell it, which I think is going to make this bio-focused compost in California a lot cheaper and more available because now it's legal to, we worked really hard to get our permit and organic certification, but this is going to really open up the doors for a lot of people. I've had a ton of experience talking to people in the government that are not in charge. Usually, the people I get to talk to are the folks that are on the ground, they're organizing, they're making decisions, but they're saying, "Hey, can you please help me talk to my superior and see if we can stop spraying glyphosate?" Like right now, all over the US, the National Forest Service thinks the coolest way to get rid of invasives is to just drop glyphosate from an airplane. Drives everybody crazy. They deal with it the same way they deal with agriculture. So they're like, let's go till native wildlands to get rid of these weeds. It's backwards. But we have had some smaller municipalities. We're not up at state level yet, but our municipalities, Reno, Nevada, absolutely loves microbes. We used to work there and apply for them, and we got so sick of driving over the mountain to see them that we just convinced them to start buying our compost and doing it themselves. So there's probably 6 parks in Reno that are totally biologically focused now. They used to have this beetle problem that was killing their trees. It's an invasive beetle that's not supposed to have any pests, and we found some microbes. Local microbes do eat them. So we've had a pretty good, go around with them just, for landscape. But yeah, it's usually the little guys we're working with are big farmers, little guys in ecosystem restoration, big farmers in agriculture. So if you guys have connections to someone in the government that can actually make changes, call
Call
me.
me.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
always willing to do a thing. So is Brian.
You get some grants. Give us those land
Yeah, I will say that
restoration
grants are
grants.
becoming, we've got a big job coming up soon, and it's all paid for in grants. I can't believe it. Usually people are paying us out of pocket. This will be the first time that we were able to secure or they were able to secure the entire job with just grants. And they got those grants within what's it been, 4 months, Casey? Three?
Yeah, but they when they applied for him to when they got him was weeks. It was
Yeah.
crazy. They were
And
like,
there and this
wow.
is in Southern California. I think after Palisades fire, folks are really starting to pay attention. Um, but yeah, they were able to just get that money. So that's good, to be able to
Yeah.
pay for things like our consultation or bioamendment or, equipment easily with grants. That's going to really change it because there's not often a lot of wiggle room in agriculture to just completely change your whole system. So, I mean, it's happening in California. I hope it's like that more across the US. I'm not really sure, but
Sweet. I guess this is could be a good last question of the day. This is from Jeremy. My 6 acre property is basically on a slope down to the sea. We've dug a couple of swales in an effort to stop the water running out into the sea. Any advice on how to harness the water better? And this is probably a good reflection of Ramirez Canyon because you have that big slope from the neighbor's kind of, the ugly neighbor house all the way down to like the little English gardens at the bottom. What did you guys do to slow the water? I know you put in some, like, there is some swales cut in, but what are some of the steps you did to slow that water flow?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was catching at there was one focal point. There was like a main focal point where we got the most runoff. And so digging like a massive like catchment pond there.
Yeah.
And then building spillway over that. That's like a lot of thing I don't think a lot of people think about is when you're digging swales. Like if you just dig a ditch, what happens when it fills? It does fill up sometimes. So it's like have an overflow point into another ditch, into another ditch, into another ditch. So really trying to slow it down, snake it across the entire property is really like the best thing you can do. And obviously, it depends on how much slope you have. You don't want to be holding too much water on something that's too steep because then you might lose the entire thing. So, yeah, a lot of it just comes down to, yeah, just putting in, it's really swales and ditches and catchment ponds and things like that, and basins around your trees, things that are just going to slow that water down and catch it and keep it on the property.
yeah. I'll add to wood chips are you cannot imagine how they slow water. They're very, very good at it. Like Casey said, you could snake it. It just depends on what you're looking for. You could also come in with ditches from different sides. You could do things called scales, which are kind of like little ponds that connect to each other. They look a lot like fish scales. But I would suggest if you're trying to listen to the water or pay attention to the water, when it starts raining, go outside. Get your rain jacket on, get your boots on, get a shovel, and go out and just like play with what moves the water. I've always been shocked at, we do these huge waterworks, but you don't need to do a lot. Sometimes just taking your shovel and dragging it across the ground will move the water to a totally different place. It's open to suggestion water. It always takes the easiest path. So you can't really see where it's moving unless you're actually watching it rain. So that's how we learned that we needed those giant ponds. I had no idea that there was a river coming at 1 inch of rain. So if you can look at your property and define those areas where most of the water is coming in and really put the focus there first, you might be able to get away with not digging too much. I think on the property let's see, the property at Linda's, which is very steep, it sounds similar to what yours is. There's not really any drainage ditches at all, but access trails that are on contour that slow the water. So if you saw in that video, you'd see the trail go like this and it snaked all the way down the hill, and then there were staircases. Those paths just act as a way to slow the water, and that worked really, really well. We didn't have to dig any ditches because it's very steep there. I mean, unreasonably steep.
Yeah,
So.
very, very. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I think also one thing I'd add too is just as you start to restore the soil and the soil health, you're going to start building a lot more stability and aggregates into the soil, which means the water that does hit that land doesn't immediately just run off. It's going to start to absorb and you're going to start slowing water down. I mean, that's the whole thing with swales and everything else. It's just to let that water settle, go deeper down in that soil profile. So the microbes will help you in that sense too.
I wish I knew the Nicole Masters statistic in her book. Really great statistic about when you restore biology, like get to a certain level of carbon in the soil, like the amount of water capture, I think in comparison to
Oh, Casey, you know that number, don't you? You
is it
remember
like
that?
60% of more water infiltration? But it was just like you get it's like
There's
60
a
or so.
gallon amount per
Yeah.
like if you look at the amount of organic content per soil, there's like a reliable
Like
conversion to
percent
the
per
amount of
acre. I think
gallons
it's
Yeah.
like 12,000 gallons of water per acre per percent of organic.
percentage. Yeah.
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 It might be
Corey Miller.
24,000. It might be 24,000 gallons of water per percentage.
Yeah, Corey Miller
Something in
did
that
that.
range. But
But
every
I
time,
like
yeah, you increase it by 1%.
I like the visualization of it. It's basically like if like D.T. Person talks about if your land is a sponge, if it's a dry sponge or a sponge that's been or a piece of clay and it hits it, water's rushing off it like diarrhea. But if your land is spongy and it's still a hillside, it's still going to coat into that sponge.
It looks like Alita is trying to raise her hand.
Oh, awesome. That sounds good. Let's unmute Alita. Hey, Lita.
It's for every 1% additional soil organic matter, 25,000 more gallons per acre are absorbed by the land. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Off by
right.
1,000.
Hey, that's what community, right? We rely upon our students to help us out, right?
This is why
You
community
got the
is important.
statistic. Well, that was
You were
great.
close, Casey. You were close.
I was close. I was like 12. No, 24.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Alita. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, I think this is a great place to sign off today. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Yeah, it's so many awesome case studies. And the next we're going to put on is all about microscopy. So we'll put the word out there. That'll be a really fun webinar. We're going to be diving deep into the world under the microscope. So I'll post the webinar later today. Maybe it'll be up by tonight or tomorrow, but we'll see everybody later and check your inbox.
And
Catch
recording will go to
everyone.
YouTube, right?
Yeah, recording. It's all on YouTube. So we'll see everybody there.
Perfect.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks,
Ciao,
everyone.
folks.
Thanks, Rob.